This is Daily Armenia, ＳivilNet's daily news digest. Here's what's making headlines in Armenia today. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan announced today that Armenia is moving forward with a plan to nationalize the country's main electricity distributor, the electricity networks of Armenia. The announcement comes just days after billionaire businessman Samvel Karapetyan publicly criticized the government's treatment of the Armenian church and was promptly arrested. Karapetyan's company, the Tashir Group, acquired the utility in 2015. He's one of the largest Armenian investors since independence, with major contributions to infrastructure and refugee aid projects. His arrest and the nationalization plan are widely seen as connected, sparking fears that Armenia is using state power to settle political scores. Economists and legal experts have raised red flags. Former Deputy Prime Minister Vache Gabrielian noted that Armenian law doesn't even include a legal framework for nationalization, warning that rushing forward could expose the country to international lawsuits. Others say this sends the wrong message to investors that contracts and property rights aren't safe. Some, like economist Haikaz Fanyan, called the move deeply alarming. He says forced nationalization without clear justification or compensation will shake investor confidence and damage Armenia's international credibility. Meanwhile, political analyst Tigran Grigoryan warns that this kind of action plays directly into Russia's hands. By mimicking authoritarian tactics, he says, the government risks weakening its own democratic foundations. The foreign ministers of the 57-member Organization of Islamic Cooperation wrapped up a summit in Istanbul this past weekend with a declaration urging Armenia to remove all remaining legal and political obstacles to finalizing a peace deal with Azerbaijan. The statement welcomed progress in the Armenian-Azerbaijani normalization process, but strongly aligned itself with Baku's core demands, including revisions to Armenia's constitution and what Azerbaijan calls the right of return for Azerbaijanis displaced from Soviet Armenia. While Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev has repeatedly asserted that hundreds of thousands of Azerbaijanis were ethnically cleansed from present-day Armenia during the final years of the Soviet Union and must now be allowed to return, Soviet-era data gives their total population at the time at around 150,000. The statement made no mention of the hundreds of thousands of Armenians who were violently expelled by pogroms throughout Azerbaijan at the same time, and then again in 2023 from Nagorno-Karabakh. Analysts warn that Aliyev's push is not simply about humanitarian redress, but may serve geopolitical aims, as Azerbaijan asserts that the resettlement in Armenia must be guaranteed by the forces of a third country, such as Turkey. Armenian officials view the return demand as a thinly veiled attempt to establish leverage or even a future Azerbaijani presence inside Armenia, in addition to the demand for a sovereign Azerbaijani corridor through the Sunik region. Armenia's foreign ministry slammed the OIC declaration as distorted and one-sided, particularly objecting to the use of the term Western Azerbaijan, a phrase it says implies territorial claims on sovereign Armenian territory. Azerbaijan's foreign ministry fired back, accusing Armenia of revisionism and denying accountability for past human rights violations. It insisted the return of Azerbaijanis to Armenia is a legitimate issue of rights and justice, not a political maneuver. Meanwhile, Baku refuses to cooperate with granting the right of return to the recently expelled residents of Artsakh. Armenian and Georgian officials appear to have resolved a dispute over the export of Armenian brandy through Georgian territory, according to a report today by the outlet OC Media. The transit of Armenian brandy to Russia and other markets had been effectively halted since April, as shipments were being seized for inspections in Georgia and not allowed through. An agreement was made yesterday in Tbilisi between Armenian Economy Minister Gevorg Papoyan and his Georgian counterpart, along with other officials from both sides. It was the first high-level meeting after several failed attempts to resolve the issue. Papoyan noted on Facebook that going forward, the sides will organize the export process of Armenian brandy under mutually acceptable and predictable conditions. This will allow 55 truckloads of Armenian brandy to pass through customs at the Georgian Black Sea port of Poti, with close to 100 more trucks scheduled to be released over the next week. Papoyan noted that further details and next steps would be forthcoming. No explanation had been given for the unprecedented delay, which was seen by some as potentially a form of economic pressure on Armenia originating from Russia, which has used such delays and bans multiple times against Armenia. The blockage threatened to damage the market share of Armenian brandy and make room for competitors such as those from Azerbaijan. CivilNet brings you the latest economic headlines from Armenia with its weekly business digest. This week, we focus on the threat to Armenia's attractiveness for foreign investors due to the plan to nationalize the country's main power distributor. We also report on the central bank keeping interest rates unchanged at 6.75%, citing increased global uncertainty amid U.S. President Donald Trump's trade war and the conflict in the Middle East. You can find a link to the broadcast in this video's description. And finally, the CivilNet number of the day is 2029. That's because Yana Simonian has been appointed the first ever Armenian female cadet of the prestigious United States Military Academy at West Point, and will join its class of 2029, as announced by the U.S. Embassy in Armenia. Founded in 1802, West Point is the United States Army's premier military academy. Foreign citizens like Simonian can be sponsored by their home countries for training to become officers in their respective militaries. And as always, please follow CivilNet for the latest news and independent reporting from our contributors on the ground here in Armenia.